This is going to be pretty short and sweet training on understanding algorithms for both organic social media posts, like the posts you would put up on a personal profile or even a business page like LinkedIn or Facebook, as well as the paid media algorithm side of things. So when you're trying to get data into Google Ads, how does the algorithm work? How do you use it to your advantage? Same thing for Facebook or TikTok or LinkedIn. The first thing to understand with all of these platforms, whether we're talking about Google or Facebook or TikTok, whatever, they're all pay to play. So their business model is built upon the fact that they want to sell advertisements. And so what they don't want to do is give you a free platform to push your content out there without paying anything. So for this reason, there's not a large ROI to your social media posts on Facebook or LinkedIn or TikTok or etc. They actually throttle your ability to reach people to usually around 2 to 3% of your total followers. And your followers, like if you look at your followers on your LinkedIn profile or your business Facebook page, most of the people following you are existing patients and customers or staff. So there's not a huge value in reaching these people because they're people that are working for you or have already become a paying patient or customer. And again, 2 to 3%. So if I've got 1,000 followers, I'm only going to reach 20 or 30 people. Like there's not a huge ROI on that. Versus if I pay $10 to Facebook, I can reach 1,000 people, right? So the cost to pay on these platforms is worth it far above and beyond the social media posts. And this is why we tell people not to invest a lot of money in their social media strategies. If you really, really push it, there are ways to make it work. But even when you look at celebrity influencers who have millions of followers, like their conversion rates on their ability to sell something through their profile is still very small. It's usually in the less than 1% range. So once you have 1 million followers, that actually becomes profitable. But unless you have 1 million followers, it doesn't really make sense because you have such a small number of people who are seeing your content in the first place. And then a much, much smaller percentage of them are likely to take some kind of buying action. So don't invest a lot of time and money in social media. Have a presence, be there, put some content up. But we strongly recommend either just having someone do it kind of on the side as part of their job, or you just outsource it to a social media vendor who's going to do it for less than what would cost you to hire someone part-time. So how do the algorithms work? Obviously, they're interest related. So if you post something and the algorithms and the platforms understand that certain people have similar interests to what you shared, it'll push out to them. Intent related, what are their behaviors? What are you asking for? Are you asking them to read something? It actually might send it to people who are more likely to read stuff. Are you asking people to buy stuff? It's going to send it to people who are more likely to buy stuff. Facebook and LinkedIn, all these platforms have a really strong profile. They know what you usually do. They know what you're interested in. They know your age demographics. They know your family members. They know where you live. Like the amount of data that these platforms have on you is quite scary, but it also allows them to do incredibly effective algorithmic content pushes. TikTok is particularly good at this. YouTube is getting really good at this. But on average, like that's how these platforms work. And then obviously the quality of the content that's being put out, and that gets tied to a profile. It gets tied to a page, whether that's an individual or a business page. If you're regularly putting out quality content, the algorithm will start to detect that. They'll start to see that more people are reading your content, more people are engaging with it, more people are commenting on it. And so the next time you put a piece of content out, the platform and the algorithm will identify that and say, well, this content's usually good, so let's push it out farther than we would, someone who doesn't post too often or doesn't post quality content. This is why in a social media strategy, it's important not just to be selling stuff all the time. You shouldn't be pushing promotions. You shouldn't be self-aggrandizing consistently, because that is not engaging content. And so you're basically having the algorithm work against you. It's not going to push stuff out there. Where if you push out interesting content, value-laden content, even sometimes funny or engaging content, that content's going to be picked up by the algorithm and pushed further. So just as an example of how this works, let's say you put up a post on LinkedIn. What LinkedIn's going to do is immediately it's going to send it to your followers, people who normally engage with your content, and it'll send it to what it considers to be your top followers. And it'll do that in the first 30 seconds of a post. And so if your top followers start to engage with the content, that's a signal to, in this case, LinkedIn, that, oh, this content is good. It fits what this person's followers or this page's followers want to engage with. And of course, all these platforms want to keep people on the platform. And so good quality content is key to their business models. So they're going to push that farther. So they see the core followers who engage the most engage with it. So then the next 30 seconds, they'll push it out a little bit more. And then they'll test it with secondary followers, people who sometimes engage with your content, but maybe not always. How do they react to that content? Do they engage with it, comment on it, click it, read it? And these platforms are checking your scroll rates. Like if you're scrolling and stopping, that's built into the algorithm, and that is considered an engagement metric. So the platform knows that this content has some value for that person. And this just kind of keeps happening in these ever-growing spirals. So I can put up a piece of content on LinkedIn that gets 5,000 views. I can put up a piece of content on LinkedIn that gets 650,000 views, right? The range is pretty wide, and it's all dependent on that rippling algorithm. Pushing it to more and more people, seeing if the level of engagement stays high. If it does, push it out, push it out, push it out. And that allows you to get in front of people who maybe might not normally see your content because it was so good. LinkedIn says, okay, we're going to go outside this page's followers because it's interesting enough to keep people engaged on the platform, coming back, et cetera, et cetera. The paid advertising algorithms are a little bit different. So they operate along similar lines. Obviously, you've probably seen this. If you click on something, if you're shopping around, if you visit a website, suddenly you get bombarded with ads for that website or similar related products and services. So if it's the same website, that's a retargeting ad, right? The organization, the marketing company, the marketing department is saying, hey, we tagged you with a cookie. We know you visited our site, here, come back. And in healthcare, we often can't do that. That's restricted for HIPAA compliance reasons. Google, Facebook, Bing, TikTok, all of them, even if you were able to do it in a HIPAA compliant way, they don't allow you to. They have terms of service against retargeting for healthcare platforms most of the time. So unfortunately, that's not something that we're able to do that most other business models are. But also, again, they've identified behavior, they've identified interest. And so if you start looking for a med spa, suddenly you'll get 5 different advertisements for med spas following you around the internet because they're tracking that intent. Now, they all require data. And going back to the garbage in, garbage out, we want to make sure we're feeding the right data to these platforms. And if we can, the best data possible. So Google Ads is a great one because it is bottom of funnel and there's very strong intent from users searching for your product or service. If you can feed admissions data or new patient data into that system in a HIPAA compliant way, Google will absolutely use that data to give you better quality calls. How does it do this? It's just cross-referencing everything. So it takes the 100 patients you give it and says, okay, what's their age? What's their ethnic background? Where do they live? What's their income level? Remember, Google has massive amounts of data on everyone based on your search volume, based on all the input that you've given it throughout the years. All these platforms have ridiculous amounts of information and know things about you. And so it takes those data points, it cross-references them with all the other data it has, and then comes up with, let's say, 10 things that are similar across your patient set. And so then it will use that information to push the content to similar people that also have those 10 similar data points. And that's what helps feed the algorithm. And that's always checking. Is it right? Is it wrong? Are we seeing that data come in over time? So for most platforms, there's minimum to be statistically significant. We have to have a certain amount of data coming into these platforms. And so most of them are looking for anywhere from 10 to 40 conversions in a given week. And so they use 7-day windows a lot of the time. And they say, okay, we need 10 to 40 conversions for us to make any kind of statistically significant guesses. But the more data you give us, the better. And so if we can get more conversions and then confirm that those conversions are working, that all feeds back into the algorithm. So keep pushing the data, pushing the data. It's not always directional. Within healthcare, this is easy to think. If you think of cosmetic surgeons or med spas, there's a certain user profile. You're probably going to see more women. You're probably going to see higher income. You're probably going to see people interested in fashion or beauty. Those data points are going to be salient to these algorithms. Whereas if you're in the behavioral health space, there's not as much saliency there. Who goes and seeks behavioral health services? Almost 25% of the US population. Men, women, young, old, into fashion, not into fashion, into Bob Marley, into Metallica, into Taylor Swift, right? There's not a correlation between the data points. And so it's actually pretty hard for the platform to build data sets. But still, again, the more information you feed it, they'll be able to find things that, we're not always maybe conscious of. Ad quality is very relevant to these platforms. Again, they want to keep people on the platform. They do not want annoying ads. They do not want offensive ads. They do not want ads that are any way, shape, or form going to turn people off the platform in general. So obviously you don't want this either, but just making a point that the better quality your ad is, again, the algorithms are tracking the engagement metrics. How many people are clicking on it? How many people are stopping their scroll? How many people are watching the video? And if you've got good ad quality, it wants to show that. So it's going to charge you less and show your ad more than it will competitors just because your ad quality is good. Most of these platforms give you ad quality scores. Some of them hide them. Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you'll see it in your engagement metrics. You'll see it in your click-through data. You'll have a good understanding of, is this a solid ad or is this not a solid ad? But always be working on your ad quality score and try and get it up there. You're not going to have 10s across the board. That's unrealistic based on user intent, based on the way that individuals behave. Like, it's very rare to have all 10 quality scores, but you should be above average whenever you can. These all perform on what's called auction-based bidding. And so basically it takes your ad quality score, it takes the intent of the user, it takes the likelihood that this ad is a match for that particular user, and then it takes all the other advertisers that are trying to target that same audience demographic, whether that's locations or interest or age or whatever, and then there's a bidding process. And so you win some of the ads, you lose some of the ads, but at any given time, there's maybe 100, maybe 1,000 advertisers that could potentially be looking to target the same demographics. And so you're in competition with them. And these platforms are always going to charge you just a little bit more than what the other people were willing to bid. And that allows you to win the auction. So there's a lot of different calculations that go into it, but just remember that's dynamic. And so that can have an effect on your total marketing budgets and ad costs because, for example, in the addiction treatment space, it's one of the most expensive areas to advertise on Google in the world. You can literally pay $60 to $120 a click for exact match targeting in Google Ads within the addiction treatment space. Whereas within general behavioral health, you're paying a quarter of that. If you go into the med spa market, that's cheaper than the cosmetic surgery market. If you're targeting a Medicaid population, not a lot of people are targeting that. And so those are really, really cheap cost per click. You're paying $1 to $4 a click. So this auction-based bidding is just important to understand as you think about your strategy and your budgeting. And then also you can do what's called bully bidding. And this is just bidding more than what everyone else is willing to pay. So you can manually bid on these different platforms and you can say, okay, everyone's paying $2 a click. I'm willing to pay $3.50 a click. And so what the algorithm will do is say, okay, this person is willing to pay more, so we're going to let them win more of the auctions. And so we call it bully bidding, because it kind of pushes the other advertisers out just because you're willing to pay more. So again, all these platforms are pay to play. If you're willing to pay more, you're likely to win more auctions. Everything's location based, big factor in the algorithms. Every platform knows your location, right? It's tracking your phone, it's tracking the IP on your laptop, where you log in from. And so if I go and I search for Med Spa California and I'm based in Indianapolis, oftentimes I won't even get ads because Google knows that I'm not in that location right now. So I must not be looking for local services. And Google does us a favor and doesn't push a client ad in front of someone who's not likely to convert, which is great. But understand that it is all very location based and it's also individualized in that sense. So if I'm not someone who's normally interested in med spas, Google is highly unlikely to show me an ad for med spas. it wants to show ads to people who are likely to take action because one, that's how Google makes money. They charge per click. And two, it makes the advertisers happy. Google doesn't want me clicking on a MedSpa ad that I'm not going to utilize the services for because the advertisers are going to be unhappy and unlikely to pay Google more money to continue to advertise. So very individualized. And you'll see this if you're in an executive conference room and all of you look for this same exact key term at the same exact moment, you'll all see that you'll get different ad sets as well as different organic listings because Google's and Facebook and TikTok are all tracking your profiles and they're showing you things based on how you normally engage, what your interests are, what your demographics are. And when we do the SEO section training, you'll see that as well. Google is giving different results on a mile by mile radius. Actually, probably much smaller than that, but from a reporting standpoint, you generally will look at mile by mile. So as you get farther and farther away from a location, like from your program's facilities, your service lines facilities, you'll find that you're less and less likely to rank for your target key terms. And that's because Google knows that people are less likely to convert traveling farther away. Or if they're looking for local information, they want information that is literally as physically close to them as possible. So as you get 30 miles away from a particular facility, you are less likely to rank for a key term, even if you rank number 1 or number 2 when you are right next to the facility. So all of this is strongly built into the algorithm rankings. Again, you could have a search that you do at the office and you get a completely different ranking set than if you do that same search at home that's 10 miles away. So keep that in mind. It's something that a lot of people don't realize, but location is a significant factor in terms of how advertising algorithms work, in terms of how organic SEO algorithms work. Pretty important stuff. So hopefully that's just a really nice short overview to give you a better sense of what are we doing with social media, what are we doing with advertising, and how do these algorithms help us or hinder us in those goals.